So you moved to Affin Hwang, and I believe you were involved in that post-merger integration. You were involved in quite a few big deals. There was also the IPO of Serba Dynamic Berhad as well. So what were the highlights, if you will, at the time for you?
Yeah, going over to Affin Hwang was like a quote unquote big fish in a small pond. And little did I know I would also then go to StashAway, which is a much smaller pond. But I think in a small pond, you can learn a lot and you can make your skills be very valuable to the organization. So coming from Khazanah, where I was in a big pond and there was a lot of talent there, it was very hard to stand out. At Affin straight away, working with my former boss, Johan, it was very clear that Affin was a different type of organization. I immediately got access to the C-suite, to forming and executing a strategy for the organization, which sounds very interesting, sounds very sexy at that time. And when I went over, we were just in the midst of finalizing the merger. So at that point in time, what was very clear to us was that if we did not have a strategy and if we did not execute well on this strategy, the value of the merger would disappear. There were these mythical creatures called synergies that you would need to capture in the first 2-3 years. Otherwise, the business would kind of revert back to the normal and you would not have captured these synergies and it would be very hard to justify having done the merger in the first place. So at that point, there was a great sense of urgency and there was a great sense of transformation because Affin, a very GLC kind of organization, was going to merge with Hwang, a very entrepreneurial kind of like Chinaman run company. And together we would be this boutique investment bank that was scrappy and could win deals and finally make its mark on the league tables. So that was the feeling at that time. And I went into it with a lot of energy. I helped my boss at that time, Johan, recruit a team of 3 other people to help to form the strategy office, to then work with the consultants at that time to form and then implement the strategy that we had formed. That was very, very interesting and a lot of learnings from that as well. Like what is good strategy, what is not good strategy. And after doing 2 years of that, when the merger was already nicely sewn up, and it didn't feel to me like there was a lot of stuff to learn because that momentum of that initial merger had now been business as usual because we had done what we needed to do or we had kind of come to terms with the things that we could not do. And then it was very BAU. So to me, I was less motivated. I was always looking for that new high. And I then transferred laterally to equity capital markets to, like you said, list different companies, including Serba Dynamic, including at the time called MI Equipment, now called MI Technovation, or unless they've changed the name again, I don't know. Both of which, since IPO, I've done very well. If I just had bought stock on the first day after it listed, I'll be very, very wealthy, but I didn't. But yeah, it is very, very interesting to work on transactions. So like this combination of working part-time as an accountant and then in funds management and then in Khazanah as a sovereign wealth fund company and then transitioning to corporate strategy. And then finally, I could be an investment banker. I say that I do deals. And it was fun doing deals. Doing the BD, pitching for deals, actually winning them was a real delight. Working with a very small but very tight team to achieve something. To kind of see a company through to listing day was an achievement in itself. And we got exposure to great entrepreneurs to see how well they position their business for growth. I was actually very happy doing deals like that. I think if StashAway didn't come knocking, I would have stayed there for another few years. Easy.
So what happened? Because I'm sure joining a tiny startup only 2 years ago at the time was the last thing on your mind.
It was. And to be fair, these weren't big deals. They were just big deals for Affin because they would be like our first mid-cap IPO and things like that, lead role. That's what big meant for us. But I was very happy. And I remember at that point in time, a few of my friends started to leak away into the digital or startup space. When you go to a family gathering and it's like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? And like, oh, I'm working with Shopee and they're posting me in Vietnam or Philippines or whatnot. So, okay, that's interesting, like e-commerce, okay, whatever. Then you meet people like, oh, I work for Uber. Someone actually LinkedIn me and said like, do you want to join Uber? And I was like, no, I don't know if this will fly. I don't know what it is, but yeah, not for me. And then you saw people like join My Taxi, which obviously later become Grab, and see people join fintech startups like my friend Wilson Bay from Policy Street, who went on to found his own company, Policy Street, with 2 other co-founders. I still had my head in the sand. I was like, no way that these kind of things would be lucrative or like something for the long term or something that I would ever want to be part of, because the business of startups at that point, to me, the wrong perception was that it was all about hype, because it was like, what's so fashionable about going out there, creating a business model and burning cash and hoping that one day you become a monopoly? and then obviously list and all that. I just didn't understand like where is the fundamentals to this. Just was too much into traditional finance. But once I understood that being in a startup and creating value and getting into monopoly means that you are creating value just down the line. And actually with good business discipline, you can actually make money. A lot of companies have since made money. The likes of Facebook and Amazon, they now make money. So I slowly learned that was possible as well. And I didn't think that it was a career for me because I just didn't see something that I liked. I didn't care about e-commerce. I didn't care about ride hailing. I didn't care about insurtech, and fintech was a buzzword at the time. So it all came down to luck, really. Working in banking, I like wearing suits and I like wearing shirts, tailored shirts. And I was shopping online, and lo and behold, there was this company called Custom Tribe, which made tailored shirts. I bought those tailored shirts, loved them, and I wrote into the support desk and said, "Hey, I love your shirts." And the guy responded to me and said, "Would you want to go out for lunch? Because I think I will learn a lot from a customer and a user like you. What is important to you?" So I met Yi Hong, who actually was the founder of Custom Tribe. And he said, "What is important to you as a customer?" And I said, "What's important? Fit. Fit is everything. I don't care if you have 10 SKUs, blue, yellow, stripes, whatever. I just want nice white shirts which are very good fit." And then we talked about everything, like the thickness of the cotton. And I would tell him like the buttons are very tight to go into these holes. Can you give me slimmer buttons? And then he would say, "What if I made the hole a bit bigger?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that works too." It was like that. It was that kind of relationship. It was quite fun actually. But then his business didn't do very well, and he shut shop and he went to Singapore to join a venture capital company. And while I was happy doing my pitch books and doing IPOs, he WhatsApped me and say, "Hey, I just met this really interesting company called StashAway. The founders are really amazing and they want to expand to Malaysia. You're a finance guy. Like, do you think you want to put your hand up for the job?" So I remember not answering him because I remember not registering what a StashAway was and what a fintech was. So I was just like, yeah, not really my thing. So I didn't respond. And 2 days later, he said like, "Oh, I'm serious. I just send me your CV. I can just forward it to them." So I was like, okay, just out of respect for my friend. I looked it up, StashAway in Singapore, and I was really wowed by the website. It was very beautifully designed. But there was a logo there by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which I went, hey, this is a startup, but it's regulated. And not only is it regulated by whatever, it's regulated by the MAS, and MAS has very, very high standards. So I did more research. I was like, oh, it's a robo-advisor. It puts together ETFs to form portfolios for you to invest outside of Singapore or outside of Malaysia. That's really cool. Oh, they have a mobile app as well. Why don't I download it and try? By the time I was already sprucing up my CV, I sent it to Yi Hong. And when I had that first conversation with Michele, the co-founder and the CEO, he said to me, "Oh, your CV came highly recommended by this VC." And I said, "Oh, no. It's my good friend Yi Hong who works for this VC. I don't know them that well." But you see, just like by fate manifesting in the ways that fate manifests, you getting in the door is very important. Obviously, staying in the room is a completely different thing. But Yi Hong and that nice opener about being highly recommended or whatever was a really cool way to get in the door. I like to think I've done things since then to stay in the room, but as origin stories come, I thought Lady Luck had a big part to play. And till today, me and Yi Hong meet every time I'm in Singapore, and we're like, oh, that was just so crazy.
And what was it about StashAway, or maybe your conversation with Michele, that convinced you to jump to StashAway?
Yeah, so I was pretty much sold by the time I spoke to Michele because of three main reasons. The first thing was that I felt that they were very legit. It was not a hope and a dream. They were a legit regulated licensed company in Singapore, which is not easy to be regulated. Very, very high standards. And then the second thing was when I downloaded the app, I started to use it and I felt like this app is beautifully designed and I like using it. And even if I didn't join StashAway, I would use StashAway. So I felt like if I could join StashAway to help them build a business around this great product, I think there'll be a lot of promise. The third thing was the people, because before meeting Michele, I spoke to the head of HR, Siwi, and I got the sense that she was really, really warm, really lovely, and that everyone in StashAway would be like that too. And I was not wrong. Everyone in StashAway is like that. Very, very smart, very, very high EQ, and just nice people, which is, sometimes hard to find in a high IQ environment. So I was sold. Like I spoke to the CEO, Michele, the CIO, Freddie, and Nino, the CTO, and all of them had the same vibe. The DNA was consistent. So the people really sold it for me.
Was there any hesitation? Because I listened to an interview that Michele did on Clubhouse, and he said when I was trying to raise capital, 2.3 million, spoke to 125 investors, 124 said this will not work. So
Yeah, that hesitation, I guess, was already behind him because they had already raised Series A by the time I signed. So, of course, I did have some doubts, but the doubts were very quickly ameliorated because he said at that point in time, and my candidacy was almost confirmed, he just said, like, in confidence that, yeah, it's looking good and we are able to raise, so shouldn't be worried about that at all. And that just gave me the confidence to join them and to help them launch. So ultimately, it just came together. And obviously, since then, we've raised Series B and a Series C, and we're doing very well as a company. So I feel like 2.5 years ago, it was luck that got me started, but I guess I had a decent checklist as to why I wanted to join StashAway, but I like to think that there was some good execution in the last 2.5 years, along with some luck, of course. Markets, a wily beast, but well, I guess we don't have luck because we had coronavirus and terrible markets, but the markets recovered and our portfolios did well. So there's an element of our CIO's skill involved as well. And we've done very well. And I like to think that Malaysia is punching above its weight in terms of its contribution to the group. So the journey continues, and long may it be fun.
So let's linger a little bit on those early days, because you joined in July and I believe they launched in Malaysia in October. So were you very clear when you joined that this was your purpose, to bring StashAway out of Singapore for the first time into a new country? What were you supposed to do?
Yeah, so with a great startup like StashAway, where you had heavy hitters in every single department. So heavy hitters in digital marketing, in product and design. So product and design is what you see in the app and what you see in the website. That's the product. Good people in investments, our CIO, and good compliance people. All I had to do, and they made it very clear to me in the beginning, is to make as much noise as possible. So that meant getting the word out, working with advertisers, working with partners, meeting with high net worth individuals, doing a lot of PR, and recruiting people to help us grow the practice would also be a big part of that. And also keeping the regulators happy with how we were complying with the framework. That whole broad mandate was upon me, and it was not difficult to execute because when you have, I guess, all aces, it's very difficult to lose. So I tried to contribute as best I could, try and recruit good people for them to see the same vision, try and get them excited. Met with the regulators, made sure that the final hurdle towards that licensing was all well and good, and made sure we were well set up for our launch. So when we did launch, we had a press event and people wrote about us, and I was on radio and short after that TV and papers and all that. I kept remembering just Michele saying to me, make a lot of noise, make a lot of noise. So that's what I'm good at doing now, just making a lot of noise, because there were a lot of things that were being done before the launch, like actually making sure the product was ready for Malaysia. But Singapore and Malaysia, not that much difference in terms of the wording and the tone. Unlike, say, launching in Thailand and Hong Kong, which we're close to doing, there's only so much localization that can be done. Right? So we did those, made sure we did them well. But when it came to launch, the most important thing to do at that time was make noise. Right? So make noise we did.
Were there particular things that you found were very effective? Because you have 5,000 people on your wait list. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So again, some of it luck. So I remember that when we launched that, while digital was also going on, the tech conference. And my sister-in-law was working with Catcher at the time, and she said that, hey, does Michele want to speak? I give him a slot to speak about fintech, because he was at Zalora, and at Zalora, he would be a speaker at Wild Digital. So he came to speak first time on behalf of StashAway. And after his talk, my sister-in-law introduced me to The Edge. And it wasn't just The Edge, it was the personal wealth section. This reporter called Nat Tan, she has been following us till today. She writes about us and she's been a supporter till today. So we met her in that conference. And when she wrote about us, she was even nice enough to include our website to say, if you want to join the waitlist, go to this website. And for a small business that's struggling to find the right to survive, a small thing like that would change things. So great digital marketing on top of decent PR before the launch helped us build a really good waiting list. And a lot of it was actually organic as well, because Malaysia, very close to Singapore, Malaysians living in Singapore, Malaysians who invested in Singapore would go on Laoyat and like, oh, this StashAway, blah, 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 StashAway, you must join, right? So like, it can be good and bad. So in this case, it was good. And ultimately, we had 5,000 people. And then when we launched, it had a lot of kinetic energy from day one. And then on top of making a lot of noise and having a lot of fun, I guess those were the heady days. In my first year, we just went on so many roadshows and things like that. There was one fateful week where I had 15 speaking engagements in the span of 14 days. So in 2 weeks, I will be speaking at least twice a day. And this was before Zoom. So it's not like I can just buy and then go. It would be like, okay, go to this conference and then go to that conference and then go to this company and do something for internal and this, that, and the other. You would feel a little bit rock star because you would go to this conference and say like, sorry, I can't stay for Q&A because I have to go to another conference. But those early days were very, very busy, very, very fun. The way we would relax would be to meet a lot of our friends and tell them, StashAway, 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 StashAway. So I would show them the app. I would tell them why I joined. I would tell them to put money. Some of them did, some of them did not. I have names of people who did not invest back then. But it's amazing. And even at that point in time, your friends will help you and you really get to see like who your so-called friends are. And the ones who really help you, I would never help me. I would never forget. There was even once that we set up our bank account and we just needed people to test out whether our bank account was okay. So I was literally asking people like, can you transfer me a few thousand so I can give it back to you? Just so things would be fine. Of course, we transfer our own money as well, but like you need a relatively large amount of people just so you can read the code from different banks and things like that. Small things like that, but crucial, right? So I was telling my friend like, yeah, can you transfer? And then some had like no questions asked. And like, wow, these guys are really loose with their money. And then some like, are you sure? Where is it going? Will I get it back? And I'm like, yeah, this is not the investment part yet. That will come later. Don't worry. This is just me testing out my banking operations. So yeah, that was how we set up. And collectively as a group, Singapore and Malaysia, now we manage more than $1 billion US. So that's no mean feat in around 3.5 years, which I'm very proud of for the group. I'm very proud of all the people who did it from day one. We contribute, of course, a small amount. Whenever you take Malaysian ringgit and you divide by 3 and you divide by 4, the contribution seems a little bit smaller than how I think about it, but it's okay. I think people recognize our contribution.
I imagine with all the fun, there were also challenges. When you just launched Q4 2018, market went down 20%. So how did StashAway tackle that?
It was okay because actually in Singapore they had a bigger pot to manage, so they had their own challenges talking to investors there. But because we were new, we only had 1 to maybe 3 months worth of people. The amount of people to manage was not bad and not a lot. And the people who joined at that time in the low markets would be laughing because they would make so much money. Little did they know that 2020 would be a crazy year, but in every correction and every bear market, there'll be people that make money from it. So that's why I keep telling people that the time and where we are in the market cycle doesn't matter as long as you have a long-term horizon. So the challenges were more around getting product market traction. And a big way of getting product market traction, especially when it comes to money, is to earn people's trust. And so I was very, very aggressive on that earning trust side, because we were new and our brand did not hold a lot of weight back then. We just had to be very consistent and we had to make a lot of noise in a way so that people would trust us. I always feel like trust is something that you can borrow. You can never steal, you can only borrow, and you can give it back. So I remember in the early days that we went on BFM, and BFM is like big media outlet and they lend you trust. We went on and we did our show and borrowed some trust. And we thought, actually, hey, BFM is like a really good channel. So let's do some advertising here as well. Like, no brainer. 30s, 40s, professionals, Klang Valley, let's do it. So it was nice to be able to say to them like, hey, we would like to be an advertiser as well. And then from then, first time actually recording a radio ad. We've now done it 4 times to see ads being created, to see billboards being created, that we wrapped LRT stations to look for places where you would want to appear from a PR perspective was actually really cool. So running a business is not just about the dollars and cents. A lot of it is about where do you want to be in front of your customers. So that's very marketing 101. And it was very cool for me to experience firsthand because it was very tactile, it was very real. It was like, if I gave you 100,000, 200,000, where would you go and advertise? So because you're the most Malaysian person in the room, you need to go in, you need to know something. So that was really, really fun.
Was content creation part of the major arm of building trust? Because that's something that you guys do really well. There's an academy. I think there's like 3 pillars of content. There's like personal finance, there's StashAway, and there's also like investment as well. So was that something that was very clearly a part of your strategy from the start?
Yeah, so this all comes down to our head of content at that time and now head of growth marketing, Rachel. So Rachel is this really special talent who has a very good mix of business knowledge, business background, but also things other than business. So she was not like an industry veteran where she only had a certain way of doing things. she would always communicate in a very authentic, genuine, straightforward way because that's how she wants StashAway to communicate with her as a user. So she used that skill, and branding and writing content is a skill. It's not easy to actually produce a lot of stuff in-house. And a lot of the tone that we use is educational and it is non-reactionary because we don't want to be telling people to change their view of the world every time Jerome Powell coughs or
Trump tweets.
the or Trump tweets. Yeah, that's a good one. So very early on, they set the tone of voice to be very authentic, to speak directly to the customer because their money is in our hands in a way where we would have them focus on the long term and create good habits because people didn't necessarily have good habits from the start. So we needed to inculcate these habits. So through market cycles, through ups and downs, through different changes in the portfolio, the tone would be the same. It would be assuring, it would be long term, it would be to create good habits. So when I came on board, it was only to work with her to say, what would Malaysians' attitude be towards content like this? And what other media would also be surrounding them so that our content can be relevant? So writing about our retirement and talking about EPF rates and PRS and how that it's really not enough to just rely on those two things to have a good retirement. You also need to invest on the side. On top of that, was a big part of being who we are as StashAway, having good content creation in-house and also relating that to what's happening in the real world because markets are very, very fragile. And I had a clubhouse session with her as well. And then she brought up a lot of those points. And I'm very glad she's on our side. So like I said, we have very good people in all our positions. So I'm just very glad to be working with amazing people like that who I can learn from and who seek my input when it comes to Malaysia. So it's a great culture actually throughout.